What if the thing you are trying so hard to fix is not broken? What if the anxiety, the restlessness, the quiet dissatisfaction you carry is not proof that you are failing at life, but evidence that something deeper is calling you? 8 centuries ago, a man wrote words that still feel like they were written for this exact moment, for the nights when you cannot sleep, for the questions you are afraid to ask out loud, for the longing you cannot explain. His name was Rumi, and his teachings were not designed to impress the mind. They were meant to wake up the heart. We live in a world that teaches us to improve, to optimize, to become more efficient versions of ourselves. We measure progress in numbers, income, followers, achievements, milestones. But Rumi speaks from an entirely different dimension. He does not ask how successful you are. He asks how open you are. He does not ask what you have built. He asks what you are willing to release. And that shift alone can change everything. One of his most repeated ideas is deceptively simple. The wound is the place where the light enters you. At first, it sounds poetic, beautiful, even comforting. But when you sit with it, it becomes disruptive, because it suggests that the pain you are trying to avoid may be the very doorway to transformation. Rumi does not romanticize suffering, but he refuses to waste it. He sees heartbreak as initiation, confusion as invitation, loss as a hidden form of guidance. In a culture obsessed with avoiding discomfort, this perspective feels almost rebellious. Rumi teaches that the ego, the version of you that must always be right, always be admired, always be in control, is not your true identity. It is a shell, necessary at times, protective in certain seasons, but not ultimate. And life, through love and loss, slowly cracks that shell. You fall in love, and suddenly you're vulnerable. You fail, and suddenly you are humbled. You lose something you thought you needed, and suddenly you are forced to look inward. These are not random punishments, they are sacred interruptions. He once wrote, "Stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion." Think about that for a moment. Most of us live compressed lives, defined by comparison and fear. We shrink ourselves to fit expectations. We silence parts of our personality to be accepted. We chase validation as if it were oxygen. And yet Rumi insists that beneath all that contraction, there is something vast, not in an arrogant sense, but in a deeply spiritual one. You are not merely a collection of roles and responsibilities. You are consciousness experiencing itself. Another teaching that quietly runs through his poetry is the idea of surrender, not passive resignation, but active trust. Surrender, for Rumi, is the moment you stop fighting the current and begin to flow with it. It is not about giving up effort, it is about releasing illusion. We spend so much energy trying to control outcomes, predict reactions, secure guarantees, but life rarely obeys our plans. Rumi invites you to loosen your grip, to trust that even what feels like detour may be direction. This does not mean becoming careless, it means becoming attentive. Rumi's spirituality is intensely alive. He speaks of listening, to the wind, to music, to silence, to your own heartbeat. In the opening of his great work, the Masnavi, he begins with the cry of a reed flute separated from the reed bed. That sound of longing, he suggests, is the sound of every human soul remembering its origin. There is something in you that knows you belong to more than routine and repetition, and that knowing shows up as restlessness. Perhaps that is why his words continue to resonate today, because beneath the surface of modern life, notifications, deadlines, endless scrolling, there is still a quiet hunger for meaning. We try to feed it with distraction, but it returns. We try to drown it with noise, but it waits patiently. Rumi does not offer quick solutions, he offers depth. He suggests that instead of numbing the hunger, you should explore it. Instead of silencing the longing, you should listen to what it is asking for. He also challenges the way we see love. For Rumi, love is not merely romance, it is the force that dissolves separation. It is the energy that pulls you beyond selfishness into connection. When he speaks of the beloved, he is speaking of something larger than any single person, the divine, the source, the essence that animates existence. Yet he uses human language because that is the closest analogy we have. To fall in love is to lose control, to be changed, to be opened. In that sense, love becomes a spiritual teacher. And here is where his teaching becomes personal. What are you clinging to right now that might be ready to fall away? What version of yourself are you defending out of fear? What would happen if you allowed yourself to be seen without the armor? Rumi's message is not comfortable, but it is liberating. He is not asking you to add more to your life. He is asking you to remove what is false. As we continue, we begin to see that Rumi's wisdom is not a collection of isolated quotes. It is a coherent vision of transformation, one that moves from ego to essence, from fear to trust, from fragmentation to unity. And this movement from fragmentation to unity does not happen all at once. Rumi understood transformation as a gradual unfolding, almost like the turning of seasons within the soul. There are moments of clarity, followed by confusion, moments of peace interrupted by doubt. Many people assume spiritual growth should feel constantly uplifting, but Rumi describes something far more honest. Growth feels like being rearranged from the inside. Old certainties dissolve before new understanding appears. You stand for a time in uncertainty, and that uncertainty becomes sacred ground. One of the quiet teachings hidden throughout his writings is the importance of presence, not the modern idea of productivity disguised as mindfulness, but a radical intimacy with the present moment. Rumi suggests that most suffering comes not from reality itself, but from resistance to what is already here. We replay the past, negotiating with memories that cannot change. We rehearse the future, fearing events that have not arrived. Meanwhile, life unfolds unnoticed. To be present, in Rumi's view, is to step out of psychological time and return to direct experience, the breath entering your body, the sound around you, the simple fact of being alive. He often uses ordinary images to communicate profound truths: a candle melting, a moth circling a flame, a drop longing for the ocean. These metaphors are not decoration, they are maps. The candle teaches that giving light requires melting. The moth teaches that true love risks transformation. The drop teaches that individuality is not lost in unity, but fulfilled within it. Rumi invites us to see existence symbolically, to recognize that life constantly speaks in quiet metaphors if we slow down enough to notice. Another essential lesson appears again and again in his poetry. Stop searching outside for what already lives within you. This does not mean isolation or rejection of the world. It means recognizing that fulfillment cannot be permanently supplied by external circumstances. Achievements bring satisfaction, but only temporarily. Relationships bring joy, but they cannot complete an inner emptiness on their own. Rumi points toward an inner source, a stillness beneath thought, a presence untouched by success or failure. He believed that humans spend much of their lives looking for the key while already standing inside the house. He writes, "Why are you so busy with this or that, or good or bad? Pay attention to how things blend." In other words, reality is less divided than we imagine. We categorize experiences as victories or failures, blessings or obstacles, yet often the very events we resist become the turning points that shape us. A rejection redirects a life, a loss deepens compassion, a period of loneliness awakens self-understanding. Rumi encourages a wider perspective, one that sees life not as a sequence of isolated events, but as an interconnected process guiding us toward awareness. This perspective changes how we relate to difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the question becomes, "What is this teaching me?" That shift transforms suffering from meaningless pain into potential wisdom. It does not remove hardship, but it changes our relationship to it. Rumi never promises a life without struggle. He promises struggle can become transformation when met with openness rather than resistance. He also speaks deeply about silence, something often misunderstood. Silence, for Rumi, is not emptiness, but fullness beyond words. He believed language eventually reaches its limit. You can describe love endlessly, but the experience itself remains beyond explanation. This is why moments of quiet sometimes feel more meaningful than conversations, why music can express what sentences cannot, why certain experiences leave you speechless. In silence, the mind loosens its grip and something deeper becomes perceptible. And yet, Rumi was not advocating withdrawal from life. He laughed, taught, walked among people, engaged with the world fully. His spirituality was embodied. He found the sacred not by escaping humanity, but by entering it completely. The marketplace and the monastery were not opposites. They were different expressions of the same reality. This idea is profoundly relevant today, when many people feel forced to choose between inner peace and participation in modern life. Rumi suggests the integration of both. Perhaps the most challenging part of his teaching is trust, not blind belief, but experiential trust. Trust that life is moving even when you feel stuck. Trust that meaning can exist even when you cannot see it. Trust that the periods of confusion are not regressions, but transitions. Just as night prepares the world for dawn, uncertainty prepares the soul for insight. Rumi repeatedly returns to this rhythm: dissolution before renewal, emptiness before fullness. And slowly, through these teachings, a new understanding begins to form. Happiness is no longer something to chase, it becomes something uncovered. Identity is no longer rigid, it becomes fluid. Love is no longer dependency, it becomes expansion. The teachings begin to weave together into a single realization that what we seek outwardly is guiding us inward toward a deeper encounter with ourselves and with existence itself. And when that deeper encounter begins, life does not necessarily look different from the outside. You may still wake up to the same responsibilities, the same environment, the same challenges. But something within you has shifted. Rumi's teachings are not about escaping your circumstances. They are about transforming your perception. The same event that once triggered fear can become an opportunity for awareness. The same uncertainty that once produced anxiety can become a space of possibility. What changes is not the world first, it is the way you inhabit it. Rumi repeatedly points toward the idea that you are not separate from what you are seeking. This is perhaps his most radical and liberating message. We spend years trying to find peace as if it were hidden somewhere outside of us. We chase love as if it were a scarce resource to be earned. We pursue purpose as if it were assigned by external validation. But Rumi suggests that these qualities are not rewards, they are aspects of your deeper nature waiting to be uncovered. The search itself, when directed outward only, becomes endless. The turning inward becomes the revelation. He speaks of polishing the mirror of the heart. Over time, experiences, disappointments, and fears leave residue. The heart becomes clouded, not broken. And instead of condemning yourself for feeling distant or lost, Rumi encourages gentle refinement. Through awareness, honesty, and surrender, the mirror clears. When it clears, you do not become someone new, you recognize who you have always been beneath the noise. This is not self-improvement in the conventional sense, it is self-remembrance. There is also a profound humility in Rumi's voice. Despite the depth of his insight, he often describes himself as a beginner. This attitude dismantles spiritual arrogance. The moment you believe you have arrived, you stop growing. Rumi teaches that openness must remain continuous, curiosity must remain alive, the heart must remain soft. Growth is not a destination, it is an unfolding relationship with existence. And in that relationship, certainty becomes less important than sincerity. Consider how differently we might live if we truly embraced this. Instead of striving to appear strong, we might allow ourselves to be real. Instead of competing for recognition, we might cultivate connection. Instead of suppressing vulnerability, we might see it as the birthplace of intimacy. Rumi's teachings are not abstract philosophy, they are practical shifts in awareness. They change how you speak, how you listen, how you respond to conflict, how you treat yourself when you fail. He reminds us that love is not merely an emotion, it is a way of seeing. When you look at another person and recognize their struggles, their fears, their humanity, love becomes compassion. When you look at yourself with patience instead of criticism, love becomes healing. When you look at life with trust instead of suspicion, love becomes freedom. This vision does not eliminate pain, but it transforms the context in which pain is experienced. It becomes part of the journey rather than an obstacle to it. And perhaps that is the teaching that can change your life today. Not one single quote, not one isolated idea, but a shift in orientation, from control to trust, from resistance to acceptance, from fragmentation to unity, from chasing fulfillment to recognizing it. Rumi does not promise that everything will be easy. He promises that everything can be meaningful, and meaning has the power to carry you through what comfort cannot. If something in these reflections resonated with you, if you felt a quiet recognition rather than mere information, then stay connected to this space. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring timeless teachings that challenge the mind and awaken the heart. Leave a like if this message spoke to you, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that their longing is not a flaw, but a doorway. The journey inward is not meant to be walked alone, and perhaps this is just the beginning of a deeper unfolding.